Welcome, everybody. Welcome to another Community Fit, and in particular, a midweek desk stretch. I am your host, James, and I'm excited to be here with you today. This class is always highly participatory, meaning I will always come on early and ask in the chat, what is it that I can help support you with or through today? The response we got. So if you're like, oh, I didn't see that, it's always in the chat about 12:13, 12:14. I always bring it in at the beginning. And the response we got today was low back. And I don't think we have ever done like a low back specific practice. So let me see who it was. Carrie, congratulations. We will be working on low back today. We always try to include other bits and pieces because as it turns out, we are a closed system. And our neck affects our low back, and our feet affect our low back, and our shoulders, and so on and so forth. And our low back affects all of those things. But today in particular, we're going to have a low back focused class that kind of reaches out. If you're like, I want to work on ... make sure you are showing up just a little bit early, like 12:14-ish, if not 12:15, right on the dot, so that you can miss, or you don't miss, that shout out in the chat. Okay. I'll always stick around after class to answer whatever questions you might have in regard to the workout or the practice we have done that day. If it's like, what do I do for ... make sure you bring that in at the beginning of class so that we can work through that. But if there's something that we've done that day that you need a little more refinement or question asking around, feel free to stay after for a bit and we'll answer all of those. We're going to start off the way we always do, which is a little bit of a nervous system regulation practice because nervous system stuff is the answer pretty much to everything. And then we'll get into the movement practice. If you have a favorite nervous system regulation, stress thing, groundedness thing, mindfulness thing that you like to do, by all means do that. If you're like, I have no idea what that might even look like, well, join us on Fridays for our Adjusting to Change Toolkit class, our ACT program. This coming Friday, we're going to talk all about rest and all of the different ways that our body and our soul and our brain finds rest. So if you're like, I could do with a little more rest in my life, join us on Friday at lunchtime and we'll talk about that there. For today, let's everyone, if you don't have a practice, follow me. We're going to bring our hands together. We'll get them nice and warm. And we're just going to place our nice warm hands kind of like directly over the eyes. I like to take kind of the heel of my hand and just kind of press it into the eyes a little bit of pressure. And then I'm just going to let my head rest on my hands. And while I do that, I'm going to do some deep breathing. Now, deep breathing doesn't necessarily mean belly breath. It doesn't even mean like big breath. What it means is like, how satiated am I? And then a long, exaggerated exhale. Two or three more breath cycles. And then maybe some fingertip taps all over the face or the chest. Could do a little slapping of the arms, just like something to kind of wake up the system a bit. To the head, the back of the neck. Good. Okay. I'm going to scooch back just a bit because we're probably going to need this angle today. Okay, so low back. Low back in particular is going to hold a lot of tension, a lot of stress from a lot of different areas. Number one thing is if you persistently or chronically experience low back pain, there's a reason for that. Generally, at some point, the vast majority of us are going to tweak our low back. And that area is super smart, super sensitive, and has a lot of, for lack of better terms, control mechanisms like the fascia, the connective tissue in the back, and the muscles in the back, some of the lats, some of the big muscles that kind of come down, intersect with like a diamond shaped piece of connective tissue in your low back. And that diamond shaped piece of connective tissue in the low back organizes the muscular activation of the abs, the back muscle, the glute muscles, the spinal stabilization and rotational muscles, and it's dependent upon healthy movement of the vertebra, healthy movement of the pelvic bones, healthy movement of the ribs. So it requires like lots of things to be mobile and lots of things to be equally as strong and equally as stretchy from each other. Back muscles, ab muscles, spinal muscles, butt cheek muscles, leg muscles, lots and lots of, and some of internal visceral muscles, some of our pelvic floor muscles, the breathing diaphragm muscles. So there's like a lot of movement and integrity stuff happening in the low back, right? And low back pain is big, right? Like you get like a little bit of it and it goes, oh, system shutdown. And it's also predictive, meaning if I have low back pain once, when I start to symptomize or I feel something in my low back, it will often register in your nervous system as more alarming than it actually is. And that's a really difficult thing for so many of us to hear and understand. What I mean by that is oftentimes the pain sensations in your low back register as bigger than what the integrity of those things actually means. What I mean by that is there's actually most of the time nothing wrong with your low back, right? Nothing anatomically wrong with that low back area. It's just your nervous system going, I don't want to be debilitated again. And so we're going to scream at you because you're more likely to pay attention to the screaming. So we bypass what usually happens in the rest of the body, which is like a whisper of something's wrong, a talking like, oh, by the way, there's something wrong here. By the way, there's something wrong here. And then it takes a while for it to like scream at you. The low back pain kind of jumps over a lot of that and goes right into screaming at us. So to kind of understand that like a lot of what we're experiencing is just our body and its infinite wisdom going, you don't want to do that again, right? So kind of soft, gentle, convincing movement, right? Movement that goes, oh, I'm actually okay here. And maybe even that is the internal dialogue. Like, I'm actually okay here. Even if you have bulged discs, even if there's some scoliosis, even if there's some stenosis, not that there's not things wrong with that, right? Not that that's not a pathology of some sort, but the fact is we could take an X-ray, an MRI, a CAT scan, uh, any sort of measuring tool to the majority of our spines, and each and every one of us, you would find some version of bulged disc, arthritis, integrity thing. And it's not until we know it and it starts to symptomize pain that that pain starts to recur a little bit more. Why am I bothering and saying all of this? Well, because your spine has all of the spinal nerves. And so your body will go to protect those things quite a bit. And so as we're going through this, I encourage you to honor and pay attention and notice any signals that come up and also question, is it, is, can I find some way to do some of this movement, modulating it, making it smaller, or modifying it, making it a little bit different so that every little inkling, every little chain link of my spine is receiving some version of movement from the tailbone all the way up to the skull. And I can't do that for you, right? So as we go through this, the invitation is for you to sort of go, okay, I feel something there. Is there a way I can subtly move into this that allows some movement to happen specifically in that low back? Because it's oftentimes about convincing the low back that we are okay to move there, right? So much of that low back stuff is also coming from belly, is also coming from hips, is also coming from rib movement. So I'm going to quit talking now and we're going to start moving. And we're going to start moving from the perspective of hips. We're going to do one of our old favorites. We're going to crisscross the leg over the leg, and we're going to do a little forward and backwards rocking. Now, if you recall, last week I think we did the lower body stuff, and in previous classes, there are so many different modifications for this movement. You can take and move your leg somewhere else. You can put your leg up on something. But this is one of the really good seated hip opening practices you can do. As you do this, I'm rocking forward and back, and I'm just sort of paying attention to, do I feel weight on both butt cheeks? Or did I kind of rock away from one? Can I feel more weighted on both butt cheeks as I do this thing? And then I'm just going to do a little ankle movement here. And then reverse. And then set that leg down. Pick the other leg up, same exact process over here. Rocking forward and back. Both butt cheeks relatively equally weighted. And then into some ankle circles. And then set it down. Slide all the way to the front of your chair. Open up your legs wide here so that my feet and my knees are relatively wide. Now, this works best on a chair that has sort of a firm seat on it. If you're in like a super squishy, super ergonomic chair, you may not have the feedback in the chair that you actually need to do this practice. So you may want to move into a firmer chair, move onto a table, a bench, or wait until you get home to do this. I'm going to rock forward towards my pubic bone, and then I'm going to rock back towards my tailbone. Now, as I do that, what I'm wanting to stop or inhibit is a rocking of the low back. I want my low back muscles, bones to stay still, and I'm encouraging that movement to happen through the hip joints. As I go forward, it may feel crunchy, squishy, compacted in the groin. And as I go back, I may feel like, oh, I got to use some ab muscles in order that I don't rock in sync. I'm rocking forward and back. And again, I'm paying attention to as I move, does it feel like both butt cheeks are more or less equally weighted? So you can see why I'm saying feedback, having a firm seat is going to be important. Because if it's squishy, I'm not going to actually know really well where the bones of my body are located. I might do that rocking thing, which is fine. It's just not what we're doing right now. We're moving through our hip joints. Then I'm going to go as far forward as I can. I'm going to lift my head and send my chest forward. And I'm going to stick my tailbone backwards. So I can feel a little crunch, a little contraction, a little squeeze in my low back. And then I'm going to return to neutral. Again, some extension in my low back. I want that squeeze. A lot of the low back pain is coming from, we get pain in our low back, so we stop using the low back muscles, and those low back muscles become weaker, which then leads to more low back stuff. And then when we have to use those low back muscles, our brain goes, see, I told you every time you move your low back, you get low back pain, when really it's just like self self-caused weakness in the body. So this is just a really subtle way to get some contraction and then neutral. Contraction. It's like I'm squeezing, and in order to squeeze, I got to send my tailbone. It's like I'm trying to get the back of my head and my tailbone to touch and release. One more of those. Neutral. And then I can go into like a stretch, which means I round my low back. I find neutral. I kind of tuck my tail and round my low back and neutral, which is different than what we were doing before, which was kind of hinging backwards, right? Now it's a tuck and a neutral and a tuck and a neutral. The whole time, can you allow your sits bones, the bones underneath the butt cheeks, to feel as if they're a little wider than normal? Our inclination is as we tuck, we tend to like squeeze the butt cheeks. And I'm more interested in your abs kind of doing that work without you having to think ab squeeze, right? If I keep my sits bones feeling wide and I do the tuck, the only thing that can do that are my ab muscles. And then we kind of bridge those together. I do the extension thing, I find neutral. I do the low back rounded thing, I find neutral. Extension, neutral, round, neutral. One more of those. Center. Now we're going to just kind of sit back in our chair. A lot of our low back stuff is coming from super tight diaphragm or breathing muscles, super tight belly, especially low belly muscles. So I'm going to take both hands over each other. Favorite hand on the bottom, other hand on top. And I'm just going to go in a circle here. So I go from the top to the left, down low to the right, making a circle here. The whole time I'm pressing into my belly on a scale of 1 to 10 at about a 3. And as I do that, I'm noticing any areas that feel important to pause at. They might feel exceptionally good. They might feel tight. It might just feel different. So for me, as I go around, I'm noticing as I get over here, kind of over spleen pancreas area, over here at the top of the left, I just feel it feels different. So I'm just going to pause. Now with that, I may even want to do some like vibrational frequency, meaning I can let my hands kind of do this and breathe. After a bit, I move on and I go, is there anywhere else? Like down low, it feels different. So I'm going to either pause or do some like palpating vibrational stuff and move on. And rest. Sitting more or less up in your chair, you can either give your like low ribs a hug or place your hands on either side of the low ribs. Now, those low ribs, underneath those low ribs, you have your diaphragm or your breathing muscle. And sometimes these areas get tight, then you're not breathing well. Could be from wearing too tight of clothing, too tight of undergarments, too tight, not enough movement, not enough exercise, too shallow breathing. I mean, like the list goes on and on and on. So we're not going to think breathing through the belly. We're not going to think of breathing up through the chest. We're going to think where my hands are located. When I take my inhale, they get wider apart from each other. Exhale, they get a little closer. Inhale, they get wider apart to the right, to the left, east, west. A few more. One more. Sitting sort of in the middle of your chair, we're just going to rock right and left. Now, you might want to think of this as a seaweed spine or the totality of your spine, getting some very oceanic, subtle movement. But what I like to think about here is every one of my vertebra from my tailbone to my sacrum in between my two pelvic bones there to my low back spine to my mid back spine to my neck spine to my head spine getting movement. You'll often find that you're restricting one area or another. You may even want to brace or support yourself, like hands on your knees, hands on your armrests. And if you're like, I'm feeling pretty good, I may even want to go over and kind of touch the floor and come back up. Over as if I'm going to touch the floor and come back up. Now, as I do that, I go over. And as I come back up, I'm going to sit my butt down in the chair and come up low back spine, mid back spine, upper spine. And then I'm going to go over from the head down the spine, but I'm going to come back up from the bottom of the spine all the way back up. It's like an embodiment exercise. Now I can keep going side to side, or I can introduce a rotational spiral. Both hands go down. And when I come back up from my seat upwards, rotation. Head down, tailbone up. One more to each side. Head down, tailbone up, head down, tailbone up. From there, I'm going to let my eyes look to the left. That twists my shoulders all the way through. I'm going to hold and take some breath wherever it feels like you need to take breath here. You might want to do the rib breathing. You might want to do belly breathing. You just might want to do regular human being breathing. Then I come back from my seat, low back spine, mid, upper back spine. Rotate in the other direction. Hips, belly, chest, head. Head, chest, belly, hips. Hips, belly, chest, head. Come back to center. I twist head first, then ribs. Back to center. From there, hands are going to go on the knees, and I'm just going to let my whole spine round and my whole spine extend. It can be big, it can be small, it can be fast, it can be slow. What is the movement your body needs today? Finding your center, bring your hands together, get them warmed. Place your nice warm hands on the upper portion of the back of your neck, like way up high. Just kind of let the elbows rest and give some warmth to the back of the neck. That back of the neck, especially up high, has a lot of nerves and a lot of muscles back there that control or influence the integrity, the quality of motion and experience in the rest of your spine. So even if it's like a low back or a mid back thing, to spend a little bit of time giving some love and attention to the upper neck, specifically the back, specifically at the very, very top, kind of up where it connects into the skull, is really important and really beneficial. Now I'm going to keep my hands and my neck still, and I'm going to let my eyes gently look to the left, panoramically sweeping to the right. Nothing else gets to move but the eyeballs. We're working from a nervous system perspective to influence some of the experience in the totality or the rest of our spine. Letting the top teeth and the bottom teeth separate. Letting the tongue just rest. Breathing go normal. And the eyes just kind of sweeping left and right. And settle. Now, if you're still in sort of like an acute pain in your back, you may want to go back and play with or practice some of the stuff we just did, whatever felt important for you to do. We're going to move on and kind of take the practice elsewhere. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to face the seat that I have. I'm going to put my hands down and I'm going to let my feet be about as wide as the chair is. Now, there's nothing important about keeping your legs straight. If you notice, sometimes if we have tight hamstrings, when we straighten out our legs, our back goes kind of rounded to make up the slack there. I want your tailbone lifted, your sits bones wide, and your back relatively straight. So that may mean straight legs for you. That may mean kind of bent knees for you. From there, I'm just going to let my tailbone look right and my tailbone look left. If you were to look at me from the front, it's like you can see my hips over to one side. You can see my hips to the other side. I'm going to give you the real special view now, right? Hips